Does Week 17 still matter? It's a question many are asking after Underdog threw us an exciting curveball with Ball Mania V this year. Since its inception, Ball Mania has featured a massive top prize. BBM2 was $1 million to first, BBM3 was $2 million, BBM4 was $3 million to first place, and the top prizes were so big relative to the rest of the prize money in the contest that it would have been insane to draft with anything else in mind. And yet there were still conspiracy truthers who pushed back to this idea of optimizing for Week 17, where all of the prizes were won. At least the chemtrails were able to lead them to their min caches. Well, BBM5 is here, and the way the prizes are distributed this year couldn't be any more different than in previous years. So now we are all left wondering the same question. Should the new payout structure change my strategic approach to drafts? Is Week 16 now all that matters? Can I become a Week 16 bro? In this video, we are going to overview the BBM5 structure, dig into which week actually matters more, and provide you with a list of actionable takeaways to apply in your Ball Mania drafts and any other contests with a similar structure. I'm Pete Overzet, this is the Deposit Kingdom, and we're about to find out if Week 17 is still all that matters. A little less than 2 years ago, we posted a video on this channel with a title that ruffled a lot of feathers. Week 17 is all that matters. I do recommend checking out the full video if you haven't yet, because most of the core principles remain unchanged. But I'll quickly summarize why us best ball bros are continually yapping about Week 17 year after year. The Ball Mania Finals, which this year will have 539 teams, is essentially a small field DFS contest. The only difference is that your team is drafted and locked months and months before the contest takes place, not minutes before the games start like in DFS. But if our goal is to win the contest, then we can still approach our drafts as if we are building a DFS lineup that needs to beat 538 other entries in Week 17. Stacking, and more generally correlation, reduces the number of things we need to get right. AKA when a quarterback hits, his pass catchers are more likely to hit. And correlation also increases our variance. These stacks will either fail together or succeed together. And this is a feature, not a bug, in these top-heavy contests. Finally, we have plenty of data from both best ball and DFS contests that winning teams heavily feature game stacks in team-level correlation. The BBM4 champ, Fareed Shaheed, had a double stack and a bringback from the Week 17 Green Bay, Minnesota game last year, as well as a Cowboys-Lions stack without the quarterback. Pat Kerrane's winning BBM3 team had 3 different game stacks, with 12 of his 18 players coming from just 3 Week 17 games. Mike Leone further solidified the validity of these concepts in his Best Ball Manifesto last year. His BBM3 data analysis showed that your ability to win a 470-person field can increase by around 50% by game stacking, and ideally you will have 6 to 9 total game stacked players in Week 17. It's not hard then to see why Week 17 became the only week that mattered with these top-heavy payouts. If you weren't playing for first, there was basically no point in playing the contest. Both Pat and Fareed clearly took this to heart with their heavily correlated builds, and that's why they are multimillionaires and why I'm in my basement working on EV calculations, such as life. But BBM5 isn't your grandpa's BBM. Why does that sound so dirty? No, this new prize structure ushers in a new Ball Mania era. For the first time in contest history, Ball Mania features a legitimately smooth payout structure. I mean, this thing is pancake flat. Take a look at these top prizes. First place, 1.5 mil. Second place, 750,000. Third place, 500,000. Fourth place, 400,000. Fifth place, 300,000. Sixth place gets an oddly specific $239,490. Don't know what that's about. Seventh place gets 200,000. Eighth gets 170,000. Ninth gets 160,000. 10th gets 150,000. 11th through 15th get 125,000. And 16th through 20th get 100K. Let me try to put into perspective how massive of a shift this is from last year. Last year, 30% of the playoff prizes went to first place. This year, it's 10%. Last year, only the top 5 teams won 6-figure prizes. This year, 20 teams will win 6-figure prizes. Last year, fourth place got 150K. This year, 10th place gets $150K. Last year, 10th place got only 1% of the $3 million first place prize for $30K. This year, 10th place gets 10% of the $1.5 million first place prize. These flat payouts trickle down to all of the finalists. In 2023, the last place teams got just $1,000 back, which means if you max entered the contest for $3,750, that's 150 entries at $25 a pop, you could have potentially lost $2,750, despite the insane accomplishment of making the finals. This year, though, things are different. The teams who finish 401st to 539th in the finals will all return $3,750, which of course elegantly locks in, at worst, a break-even finish for those who max the contest. To make this all possible, Underdog did remove the regular season prizes, which were a fun twist for BBM4, but ultimately didn't alter the importance of Week 17. This year is much different. It's also important to remember that even with the updated payouts, getting to Week 17 remains tougher than ever. Only 0.08% of teams in the contest will make it there. 0.08. That means if you were an average drafter and maxed the contest every year, you would only be expected to get a team to the finals once every 8 years. With that sobering thought behind us, let's further break down how this prize pool is being distributed so we can better understand which strategic shifts we need to make this year. There is going to be a little math in the upcoming parts of the video, but please bear with me. It will help our action items make more sense. Also, shout out to RotoViz's Michael Dubner for these charts and working through all of the math with me for this video. There's a $15 million total prize pool. Almost 2/3 of it, $9.9 million, will be paid out in Week 17. Around 10% of it, $1.4 million, will be paid out after Week 16. And the remaining 25% will be paid out after round 15. We can then look at the available prizes in each round, as well as the number of entries. There will be 672,672 total entries in the contest, provided it fills, which it will, which means every entry is worth $22.30. If you're wondering where the other $2.70 went, congrats, you just discovered what rake is. That's Underdog's cut for hosting us. 2 of 12 teams will then advance from the 56,056 regular season draft pods, which will leave 112,112 teams in Week 15, which means the expected value of the entry is now up to $133.79. By the way, when we say expected value, we are just adding up all of the prizes available in that round and dividing it by the number of teams in that round. It's basically a good way to think through how much someone would charge for a team that made it to that round. Only 1 of 13 teams will advance from the Week 15 pods, which will leave 8,624 teams in Week 16, boosting the EV of those entries to $1,319.33, which is nearly a 53x multiplier on the initial buy-in. And then only 1 of 16 teams will advance from the Week 16 pods, leaving 539 teams for the Week 17 final. If you make it to the promised land, the expected value of your entry is now up to a very juicy $18,489.31, a number that is 740 times your initial buy-in. Congrats, the sweat is on. When we compare these numbers between BBM5 and BBM4, we can see that the overall EV of a finals ticket is up almost 28% compared to last year, from 14.4K to 18.4K. Similarly, the EV of a semifinals ticket is up 29% compared to last year, from 1K to 1.3K. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, hopefully we can at least all agree that both Week 16 and 17 matter more this year than they did last year. But here's where it gets really fun. Could the flatter payouts in Week 17 actually make Week 16 the most important week? Here's a simple thought experiment. If the Week 17 prizes were completely flat, that's to say every finalist got 18.4K just for getting there, then Week 16 would literally be all that matters. So it makes sense that flatter payouts in Week 17 this year make Week 16 matter more than it did in previous years. But does Week 16 actually matter more than Week 17 now? Neil Farley, who is a very sharp best ball drafter and math whiz, highly recommend following him on Twitter, was the first person I saw float the week 16 over week 17 case in a post on his profile. And I'm not gonna lie, his post initially broke my brain. I've spent a significant amount of time trying to make sense of it. I've peppered Neil with questions. I've peppered Leone with questions. I've gone back and forth with Dubner for hours on this. No one was safe from my inquiries. So just bear with me and I'll try to explain the implications as best that I can after having all of these combos with smart people. Here's the chart that Neil made to show the EV when increasing your win rate in week 16 versus week 17. When I say increasing your win rate, think of it as trying to improve your odds for that specific week. What Neil is showing here is that if you increase your win rate by 30% in the finals, but 0% in the semis. So in this scenario, you are full, week 17 is all that matters, bro. The EV of that entry is $25.13. But if you flip it around and you increased your semifinals win rate by 30% and your finals win rate by 0%, so in this scenario, you are a week 16 is all that matters, bro, your EV is actually slightly higher at $26.70 versus the $25.13. This both surprised me and broke my brain. I mean, 2/3 of the prize pool goes to week 17. How could week 16 possibly be more important? Important is a tricky word. It's not that week 16 is technically more important, it's that improving our win rate is more impactful in week 16 than in week 17. Neil's math would indicate that each percentage change in week 16 win probability is equivalent to a 1.55% increase in week 17 win rate. This part I realize isn't quite as intuitive. I apologize if your eyes are glazing over, but it makes more sense when you think of the EV for each round as cumulative instead of segmented, something Dubner shared with me. If your entire entry is worth $22.30, remember that first number at the top of the show? Then round 1 EV equals $5.38, round 2 EV equals $2.10, round 3 EV equals $4.64. So in sum, the total of these first 3 rounds, the regular season, week 15 and week 16, is $12.12 of the total EV. That's about 54%, which is greater than the standalone EV of week 17, which is the remaining $10.18, the other 46%. As Leone put it to me, when you increase your odds of winning week 16 by 10%, you basically increase your odds of winning week 17 by 10% while simultaneously having already banked the bump in prizes going from week 16 to week 17. The math here isn't really up for debate, but what is actually up for debate is how much we can actually influence and control our win rate in these specific weeks. Our range of influence, which as that phrase comes off my tongue, I can already hear it being parodied in a Best Ball Bros video, could in fact be greater in one week or another. So that's my next question. Does prioritizing one specific week have to come at the expense of other weeks? At the end of the day, we know that the weeks at the end of the season are what matters most, no matter what. Drafting rookies and year 2 players that spike at the end of the season, avoiding dusty veterans who tail off or get injured, and using anti-fragile roster constructions like Zero RB are all strategies that will help us in both week 16 and week 17. They aren't mutually exclusive. Heck, even stacking helps you win not only in week 16 and 17, but also in the regular season. In his manifesto, Leone showed that stacking 3 to 5 players with the quarterback resulted in above average advance rates out of the regular season. Stacking lets us have our cake and eat it too when it comes to all 4 rounds of the tournament. So if we're doing all of these things regardless, what this extremely in the weeds EV thought experiment boils down to is how we should approach game stacks, and more specifically, bringbacks to our core stacks. Everything else mentioned before, we should be doing regardless. I do think the math shows that ideally we should be trying to stack up both week 16 and week 17, but I don't think you have to pick one or the other. We are already using week 17 correlation as a tiebreaker in drafts. We're not reaching way ahead of ADP to correlate week 17. We're not breaking structure just for week 17. We're doing all of this alongside all of the important best ball pillars. So why not feather in week 16 correlations when they present themselves? But But come on, you knew there was gonna be a but from the week 17, bro, right? One thing I keep coming back to is the variance I want to embrace in a 16-person week 16 pod versus a 539-person week 17 pod. If we go back to what we discussed at the beginning of the video, approaching these pods like a DFS contest, something crystallizes for me. I know that if I were playing a 16-person DFS contest, I would not be forcing a bring back or a game stack. I would be approaching it more like a cash game. Sure, I'd likely have a skinny stack with a quarterback and a pass catcher, and I'd probably even have a couple players from the same team in another game. But I'd only have the bring back if the salary made sense. I would not force it. But in a 539-person contest, where first place got, say, I don't know, 1.5 million, I would be looking to embrace even more variance within a game stack. One thing to remember about bringbacks and game stacks is that their utility only comes to fruition in truly outlier games. Last year, Justin Freeman from Run the Sims did some research where he looked at how often bringbacks outscored their projection in regular games versus games where the opposing quarterback scored 30 or more fantasy points. The results are staggering. Not only did the bringbacks outscore their projection by 5 points at nearly a 10% higher clip in those games the opposing quarterback scored 30, but they outscored their projection by 10 points at almost double the rate they did in games where the opposing quarterback didn't score 30 points. When Pat won $2 million in Best Ball Mania 3, he had a Tom Brady to Chris Godwin stack with a DJ Moore bringback. Tom Brady scored 37 points in that game, and DJ Moore smashed his projection with 20.7 points. For a full review of Pat's winning lineup, be sure to check out the video Anatomy of a Winning Lineup, and make sure you are subscribed to the channel for weekly best ball strategy videos. All right, enough of the thought exercises and math. Here's how I'm going to apply all of this in my actual BBM5 drafts. First off, I'm going to continue to game stack week 17. I know you were probably shocked to hear that. And if a logical, well-priced week 17 bringback isn't available to me, I'll happily move to week 16 correlation as a consolation prize. And if anything, this will be a nice bonus for diversifying picks at the end of the draft even more, as opposed to taking the same week 17 bringbacks in the final rounds over and over. I don't think it's going to be hard to do both, especially if you're a sicko and if you're using an overlay. I'll be using the Brick Draft Caddy to overlay both the week 16 and week 17 matchups on my screen when I draft to make this super easy. And of course, I'll continue to reap the benefits of correlation across all 4 rounds in Best Ball Mania 5 by trying to make as many team-level bets as possible, because I think that this is likely the biggest correlation edge out there. And the way to reap the benefits in every round without sacrificing any win rate expectancy in another round is to continue drafting players from the same team. Most people don't want to stack up multiple pass catchers from the same team if they don't have the quarterback, but this is the wrong way to think about it. Fareed got sniped on quarterbacks multiple times in his winning BBM4 draft, but still reaped the benefits of having both Amon-Ra and Sam Laporta and both George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth on the same team. Stacking doesn't start or end with the quarterbacks. It's about making a bet on a single offense regardless of position and having to get less things right. If you want to come battle me for stacks in BBM5 and are new to Underdog, use promo code PETE when you sign up and you will receive up to $250 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. Ultimately, all the rounds are important, though I will say seek help and find God if you start stacking up week 15. The question, though, ultimately for me is which one can I reliably exert my influence on the most? For me, that's still week 17. That's where I want to open myself up to the most variance. But none of this matters if you don't draft good teams in the first place. If you're new to best ball, it's important to start with the basics. Master roster construction, understand the ADP market, dial in the player archetypes to target, and get comfortable regularly stacking players from the same team without reaching a ton to do it. Once you have those principles down, you can start feathering in week 17 bringbacks and then move on to week 16, which yes, it's another schedule to memorize, another thing to juggle. But if you have the first steps down, the basics, it's the next place to seek out a micro edge in these uber competitive contests. See you at the top of the week 16 pods. I mean week 17. See you at the top in week 17.